Hello, good morning, welcome. I'm Samuel Trapp. This is International Flavor. It is Monday here at the Lake Ozark Real Estate of the Art Studio, and we're coming to you live from damradio.com/live. You can listen to the shows later at internationalflavor.com. You can even go out to damradio.com/podcast and listen to my shows and every other guy's and girls show that broadcasts on Dam Radio. A lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff that generally pisses a person off, and I don't know. We've got CENTCOM telling us. I love this fact that it's Admiral Brad Cooper. They used to call him Bradley Cooper, but that turned out to be a bad plan. And you would think that by the time you become an admiral, that you're the one who's famous. And instead it's, well, Bradley Cooper? I didn't know he was an admiral. Maybe it's a movie. No, we don't want to talk about that. But so you would bust your whole life, your butt the whole time to become Bradley Cooper Admiral. And you get upstaged by Bradley Cooper from the movie... what's the one with Lady Gaga? That was actually a reasonably good remake of that old show. Wasn't that Chris Christopherson? That was pretty cool. Anyway, let's talk about Admiral Bradley Cooper and see what he has to say over this past weekend. Admiral Bradley Cooper reportedly told President Trump that most designated bombing targets in southern Iran have already been struck. So what are you going to do? Hit them again? The top U.S. commander in the Middle East advised Trump that striking Iranian targets around the Strait of Hormuz was no longer effective, according to Axios yesterday. Cooper, who leads, it's not, I'm stealing that, but Cooper, who leads U.S. Central Command, reportedly told the old Trumpster that the designated bombing targets in the area have largely been exhausted. And he said there's no point in continuing the strikes unless the U.S. returns to major combat operations. Trump paused strikes on Friday, abruptly ending a 13-day bombing campaign amid reports that regional mediators are trying to broker a new ceasefire. Yeah, ceasefires work very well, don't they? They give you time to reorganize and attack some more. That's it. That's it. Why don't you sit down and negotiate real peace, you bunch of a-holes? And this is same thing going on in Ukraine, unfortunately. I've been saying this forever, and Russia keeps going, nah, we're not taking this crap ceasefire. We've watched you guys for decades to do this, and we're not going to do it. You ceasefire, you break it yourselves, blame the other guy, and then the whole time all you've done is regroup. And don't tell us that's what we're going to allow you to do in Ukraine. Now, if it was just Ukraine, the Russians would probably allow it. But it's not just Ukraine. They're fighting all of NATO. They're not fighting just Ukraine. And, Ukraine, without, how many billions now has it been? So we're in the same old thing. And they gave a figure of like some 35 billion or something like that is what it's cost us so far in Iran. But it's probably triple that. With all the back end stuff, you take your straight costs, maybe. But what about all the loss of everything? That doesn't even talk about the loss of economic power, economic impact, anything like that. So several American outlets reported that Trump was concerned about dwindling stocks of interceptors used to counter Iran's retaliatory missions and drone attacks on bases across the Middle East. There was a large, the largest strike on Saudi Arabia's Man, I wish I could remember that. It's right on the tip of my tongue. Their largest refinery. It's and that's not good, because that was a retaliatory strike, and so the Strait of Hormuz, though, vital maritime choke point, remains closed to regular commercial shipping, despite American strikes on Iran's port infrastructure and military sites in the south. The U.S. resumed its blockade of Iran earlier this month following attacks on tankers attempting to transit. On June 26, Iran said that transit through Hormuz is going to be permitted only through routes designated by Tehran. So local media reported on Sunday that an oil tanker exploded in the Strait of Hormuz after striking a naval mine when it deviated from the designated navigation lane. Iranian authorities didn't immediately comment on the reported incident. So you have those little mini subs over there, right? Remember me telling you about those? And so they're taking these mini subs and putting them, they're placing mines all over the place and saying, okay, don't deviate from our route. And we're going to tell you you can go through our route. And then that way you have to pay us. And if you don't, hell, your ship could blow up. Wow. Both sides signaled that a truce, which was first reached in April and later expanded in May through the Memorandum of Understanding signed on my birthday, June 17th, is over. No doubt. The latest round of hostilities erupted over differing interpretations of the MOU. Yeah, MOU said you have to do it. No, it didn't. Well, no, it did too. And then you fight over that, which is intended to provide more time for negotiations over Iran's nuclear program. Tehran insisted it has the right to control all traffic through Hormuz and has labeled routes designated by the U.S. Navy as illegal. Now, why do they get to say it's illegal? Huh? Now, I'm curious because I really don't know this, but I'm really curious because remember, the Strait of Hormuz is like 23 miles across, and each country gets 12 miles of their own. So there's no international waters in there. But I wonder if the interpretation goes that outside of your 12 miles, it's international waters, or it's international. It's not international waters because nobody's outside of the 12 miles. Does that make sense? And so you don't have 12 miles out there. So you wonder if they have to have permission, if you will, from the other side of the strait or not. Do they have to? I don't know. And what are they going to do if they have to have it, or if the U.S. has made a deal with Oman? Who knows? And so the latest round, on this interpretations, I don't believe it's going to go anywhere. I tell you what, part of the reason I told you that story is because of the attacks. That I heard something over the weekend, and it's basically anything goes anymore. There are no red lines. They don't exist. It's all escalation all the time. There's nothing that is sacred, untouchable. You can blow up churches now. It's acceptable. You don't have to worry about that. You can blow up a resort community. That's a big deal that happened over the weekend. A resort in Russia got attacked, and swimming pools, kids swimming, stuff like that, and at a resort. So now you're droning resorts while people are having fun, and or trying to enjoy summer before school starts or whatever. And but now that's no longer sacred. People are over there. Schools aren't sacred anymore. Oh no, geez. And all you got to do is just say, well, we believe that they were, I don't know, housing drone parts. We believe that there was a command group from somebody else hiding in there. Oh, geez, they're hiding military behind these peaceful, they're creating a defense shield of civilians. And all you got to do is allege it. You don't got to prove it. You just got to say it. And suddenly that makes sense. You do it. So this leads to the war on everything. So you can attack a rescue boat if it is coming to rescue somebody you already shot. So Iran accused the U.S. of striking 2 of its search and rescue vehicles in the Persian Gulf and calls the attack a war crime. And nobody prosecutes war crimes anyway. The U.S. over the weekend pushed out the guy, I forget his name, the guy who runs the ICC, International Criminal Court, because of what he did. He filed charges against Netanyahu, and there's a warrant for Netanyahu. And so he's gone. So Iran accused the U.S. of this, and the U.S. is maintaining a blockade of Iranian ports and has attacked the Iranian Navy. Charges are public in a letter on Friday sent by Gholam Hussein Darsi, Iran's deputy envoy to the UN. UN doesn't mean anything anymore. UN's just a limp group of those guys that shake your hand and they're like a cold, clammy handshake, and they don't grab your hand, and it's like, ugh, that's the UN, okay? And Darcy said that Naji 15 and Naji 16 were struck in the early hours of Thursday off the coast of Hormuzgan province while they were engaged in search and rescue duties and got significant damage, but they didn't mention any casualties. The deliberate targeting of vessels exclusively assigned to maritime search and rescue operations constitutes a flagrant violation of international humanitarian law and international law of the sea. Nobody pays attention. I mean, the U.S. for sure doesn't pay attention to the international law of the sea. We saw that. Well, we see it in Cuba. We saw it around Venezuela. You just blow people up. There's no jury, no trial, no war, no nothing. Wow, there's narco-terrorism. Oh, where'd all that go? Oh, now, what's his name's trial is set. The Venezuelan president, his trial is set for a year from now. So he gets to hang out in jail while that happens. And we just, you can do anything anymore. There are no limits. It's no limits at all. The Ukrainians attacking Russia's Amazon, that was called a war crime. So let's talk about that for a minute. So Russia's Amazon is called Wildberries. I told you about it last week and how it works. It's pretty cool. I've actually ordered stuff on Wildberries, and you go pick it up at the Wildberries store over there when you're over there. And they have these Wildberries stores. They're all over the place. And so every 3-4 blocks there's a Wildberries location, and so you don't have to walk too far to go pick up your packages. And you go, but they don't deliver door to door, in these enormous it'd probably be a good idea for what they would do in New York or something. I doubt they go up to your apartment every time, But anyway, Kiev argues that attacks on Wildberries undermines army drone deliveries. But they've only killed civilians and ruined small businesses. So Ukraine escalated drone strikes inside of Russia, and Kiev's military strategists are taking aim at Wildberries, the largest online retailer, and is Russia's answer to Amazon. In several waves of strikes, 9 people have been killed, more than 100 injured, and losses are more than $1 billion. The deadliest strike was the warehouse in Tambov region on July 18th, and it killed 7 night shift workers. Dozens more were hospitalized with shrapnel wounds as the facilities burned. Russian entrepreneurs lost millions in merchandise, and many left in debt, no way to recover. Ukraine's Zelensky confirmed that Kiev had been deliberately targeting these warehouses. And he claimed that the facilities were being used to supply sanctioned components for drone production and navigation equipment, said Dmitry Peskov. He denied that Wildberries warehouses were used to support the Russian military. And frankly, if they are, it's minuscule compared to, the peaceful purposes, because everybody goes there. These are I don't know. People buy everything through Wildberries, just like they do through Amazon. In addition, the Ukrainian leader didn't provide any proof of the claim. He won't do it, and he won't say whether this assertion could have justified numerous civilian deaths. Wildberries has no links to the Russian military and used daily by millions of ordinary Russians. And here is why Kiev's arguments and its attempts to portray Wildberries as a legitimate target make no sense. Wildberries is not a defense contractor, and it never has been. It's Russia's largest e-commerce platform. A private company, never listed on any stock exchange. Last year's turnover was 6 trillion rubles, 77 billion, and net profit of 175 billion rubles, or $2.2 billion. The scale of the business automatically makes Wildberries a major employer and taxpayer in Russia. And according to the data, Wildberries employs 150,000 people directly, with over double that figure once franchisees are included. And indirectly, the company is estimated to support more than 2 million jobs, including those of tens of thousands of independent sellers. The infrastructure is also used by entrepreneurs in nearby countries, and so Ukrainian attacks are hitting their economies as well. The catalog is entirely civilian. Clothing, cosmetics, groceries, electronics, toys, furniture. Somewhere inside it, unsurprisingly, sits body armor, camouflage gear, first aid kits, drone accessories such as FPV goggles, stuff like that. All these items are permitted for domestic sale in both Russia and Ukraine and traded not only on Wildberries but on other platforms across the globe, including Amazon and AliExpress. Kiev has tried to make the case that the company trades in dual-use merchandise, but the argument is flawed. Almost anything sold at scale in a marketplace this size, batteries, radios, thermal cameras, tourniquets, could end up, theoretically, in a soldier's bag. By that metric, virtually every major warehouse, mall, trade center, and retailer on Earth becomes a legitimate target. So, are Ukrainian marketplaces any different? Nope. Ukraine's own big online retailers are called Rozyetka, Prom.ua, OLX. They sell the same mix of electronics, drone, payload drop attachments, outdoor gear that Wildberries does. But nobody in Kiev or Brussels suggests that Russia would be in its own right to target Rozhetka's warehouses with missiles because they sell camouflage hunting gear alongside of toasters. Why is Ukraine really hitting Wildberries? Why Zelensky claimed the facilities were used to support the Russian military, Ukrainian officials make a different argument. They portray the drone raids as an attack on a highly profitable, tax-generating institution and is meant to destabilize Russian society. Zelensky's top advisor, Mikhail Podolyak, justified the strikes over the weekend on TV by saying that any defensive war allows for the destruction of the aggressor's infrastructure used in one way or another as part of support measures, a definition that technically gives carte blanche to pummel hospitals, schools, shopping malls. He also pointed to the company's scale, arguing that this large financial pie funds the Russian military through taxes. So anything goes is what I'm saying. It is anything goes. And I'll tell you what Russia has done in response here in a little bit. According to Podolyak, if Ukraine were to destroy 30% of Wildberries' logistics capacity, the psychological sense of war would sweep over large segments of Russian society. Meanwhile, war correspondent Thomas Roper said that Kiev's European backers who are ultimately to blame for the attacks. The drones which are hitting Russia are produced in Europe, he said, and suggested that Brussels wants to provoke Russia to whatever harder steps come up. Is it a war crime to hit Wildberries? It looks like one. It's been called one. International humanitarian law does not recognize a dual-use category as justification for attacking any facility. According to existing guideline, an object becomes a legitimate military objective only if it makes an effective contribution to military action, and if its destruction offers a definite military advantage. They also state that possible incidental civilian destruction must remain proportionate to the military advantage obtained by the attack. If doubt arises whether an ordinary civilian object is being used for military purposes, it shall be presumed to remain civilian and protected, and Kiev has offered no hard evidence that Wildberries was indeed such a military-related case. Nor has Ukraine said anything about efforts to minimize civilian casualties in the strike. That's what they did. They attacked this place on a night shift, so arguably they reduced civilian casualty, but they intended to kill civilians because they decimated that warehouse. It's on video. You can check it out on Telegram. And they've done it to two huge regional warehouses, and they destroyed them and the people inside. So the Russian military now has hit logistics terminals operated by Nova Pochta. It's Ukraine's largest private courier, saying that they were used to store and transport military equipment. So former SBU officer Vasily Prozorov told TASS that a Novopoch terminal in Kiev was a primary hub for military drones supplied by Ukraine's European backers. Now, why would you tell anybody that? But he did several times, and he said it since at least June. Novopochta's ties to the Ukrainian military aren't just a Russian claim, they're public record, openly advertised by the company as well. Novopochta says it has helped deliver anti-drone ammunition to the military, has fundraised for drones and electronic warfare equipment, and has supported Ukraine's Army of Drones project, letting citizens donate hobby or commercial drones for use on the battlefield. In addition, the company has enrolled in the government's Army Plus loyalty scheme, offering soldiers in frontline regions partial shipping for a cost of 2 cents. That's 1 hryvnia, their currency. Moscow maintains that it doesn't target civilians its strikes are aimed at defense-linked facilities. How have attacks on Wildberries hurt ordinary people? Beyond the civilian casualties and the damage to the warehouses, countless small sellers and entrepreneurs have watched their money and inventory go up in smoke. Clothing designer Yelena Nikanorova estimates she lost about $166,000 worth of merchandise across all 4 warehouses. And now I am finished, she told the local media. Lingerie brand owner Tatiana Molchanova said her biggest warehouse in Elektrostal had 6,500 items in them and called the damage several million rubles in losses. A seller who would only give her first name, Yulia, said after the strikes there had been 3 days without a single sale, with the fuller financial hit still to come and recovery likely to take more than a month. Electronics retailer Alexei said his Electrostal stock included 210 PlayStations, 5 consoles, putting his losses at roughly 10 to 12 million rubles at retail value. Days before these strikes and amid escalating Ukrainian drones, Wildberries amended its seller agreement so the marketplace isn't liable for goods damaged by force majeure, a category that now covers UAV attacks. Founder Tatiana Kim has announced a package of support measures, including deferred loans, preferential credit, higher credit limit against remaining stock. Many entrepreneurs feel the measures will not be enough to blunt the impact. So Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that the situation is indeed difficult, and given the loss to both the company and its small and medium-sized seller, adding that only that the government was in contact with Wildberries. So what's the bottom line? Wildberries is tied to Russia's military the same way that Amazon is tied to the Pentagon. A handful of dual-use items useful on the front line lost in an ocean of clothing, cosmetics, and household goods, sold and bought by millions of civilians who have never worn a uniform. By Kiev's own admission, the real goal is not to cut off the Russian army supplies. It's to hit a tax-generating powerhouse and make ordinary Russians feel enough pain to stir dissent through a bombing campaign that shows no regard for civilians and that is arguably a war crime. I say it's been claimed to be, and they have talked about it as a war crime in the UN, and we shall see. I don't know. I'm against all this war anyway. Remember we were talking about the ICC guy? So I'm going to share that story with you. His name is Karim Khan, who brought cases against Israel and Russia. He has been ousted after a former staffer accused him of coercing her into a sexual relationship. She's been coerced. So she has sex, and now he's coerced her. And he's got to go. Well, never screw around at work is the important safety tip there. And that's something you should not engage in. And apparently he did. But my first thought process on that is not always, oh, gee, he's the bad guy. It's just as likely that somebody put her up to it. Wouldn't surprise me. They find out you're having sex with somebody, you're vulnerable, and they'll get them to twist. Or those type of relationships usually go bad anyway. And so sooner or later, they're going to twist on you and start, claiming that you did something improper. Where before it was all true love and, an office romance. Sluzhebny Raman, as they call it. The Hague-based ICC, International Criminal Court, dismissed Karim Khan over such allegations. The prosecutor, who's the chief prosecutor, was ousted by the Assembly of States Parties on Friday, more than 2 years after the allegations surfaced. The move was backed by an overwhelming majority of the court's 125 members, 82 voting in favor of Khan's removal, 18 voting against, and 15 abstaining. Where's the other 10 is my question. 82 and 18 is 100 plus 15 abstaining. Still only 115. There's 125. What happened to the other 10? The ICC issued a brief statement on the Assembly's decision, saying the now former chief prosecutor committed serious misconduct and serious breach of duty. The court didn't provide any further detail, but did cite the need to respect the privacy and rights of all those involved in the process. What's the process? He's gone. What else you got to do? He's finished. Khan's legal team condemned his removal, criticized the process, and the fact that he was not allowed to address the assembly ahead of the vote. That's curious, isn't it? That decision was determined by a process in which he was never given an opportunity to be heard, in defiance of the conclusions of the independent judges who examined the full evidentiary record. Yeah. They say they're going to challenge it through all available legal mechanisms. Khan also argued that the allegations were part of a smear campaign aimed at undermining the ICC's investigation into war crimes in Gaza. The accusations first emerged in 2024 when Khan was reportedly accused of coercing a female aide into a sexual relationship. Khan denied any wrongdoing and has not faced criminal charges. He remained on administrative leave from May 25 until May of 2025, not May 25, May of 2025 until June of this year, when he was formally suspended pending dismissal. So he hasn't worked for a year anyway. During Khan's tenure, the ICC issued arrest warrants for the leader of Russia and Israel, and neither country recognizes that court's jurisdiction. Russian President Putin and Child Rights Commissioner Maria Lvova-Bielova were targeted in March 23 over the alleged unlawful transfer of Ukrainian children, which they've never provided any evidence of. It's crazy. Moscow rejects the allegations, saying it evacuated unaccompanied children from a war zone and will return them to their legal guardians upon request. The Ukrainians left these orphanages with nobody there. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant similarly denounced their arrest warrants, which were issued over their alleged war crimes in Gaza. Last year, Trump imposed sanctions on Khan, for Netanyahu, of course, citing the warrants against Israel and the ICC's attempts to prosecute U.S. troops for the same thing. Yeah, but mainly Israel. Yeah. I wonder, so there was another story about the collapse of the Ukrainian military system. Can changing generals save it? In the evening of July 21 in Kyiv, for the fifth day in a row, protests continued in the capital of Ukraine and in several regional centers. Protesters were gathering outside the presidential offices and the square outside of Ivan Franko Theater, as well as in Kharkov, Lvov, Odessa, Dnipro, Nikolaev. Since July 16, they demanded two things. They want to reinstate Mikhail Fedorov as Minister of Defense and the dismissal of the Commander-in-Chief, Tsirski. They portrayed Fedorov as an advocate of modernization and Tsirski a representative of the old Soviet military governance model. That evening, during his address, Zelensky said, "I've decided that Mikhail Drapady will become the new commander-in-chief. Together with Mikhail, Yevgeny Khamara, and Pavel Palisa, we've determined how the configuration of the general staff of the armed forces of Ukraine should be updated." The protests that began after Fyodorov's dismissal on July 15 were a rare example of open public discontent with the government's personnel policies during wartime. They reveal lingering contradiction within the Ukrainian military political leadership and resulted in personnel changes at the highest military level. When Tsirski assumed the post of commander-in-chief in February of 2024, he had experienced the several key episodes of the war. Even at the start of the war, the downside of his approach was apparent. The ultimately unsuccessful defense of Bakhmut, which Tsirski oversaw as ground force commander from 2022 to the spring of 23, came at an extremely high price. The armed forces of Ukraine held the city for months in conditions of encirclement. Ukrainian units suffered heavy losses. Critics in the army and among experts were already pointing out that holding the position at any cost depleted reserves faster than yielding strategic benefits. In May 2023, Russian forces captured Bakhmut anyway. So after he became the commander-in-chief, he made some difficult decisions, and in February 2024, he ordered the withdrawal from Avdiivka in order to avoid the same encirclement. The city was abandoned. This was Russia's first major territorial success after Bakhmut, and was followed by a wave of criticism against Tsirski. Some saw that as a pragmatic decision, but others saw that the old defense strategy no longer worked. The most notable campaign commanded by Tsirski was in Kursk. The joke of the Kursk campaign, that was ridiculous. And but everybody says this was pushed by the Green Goblin, by the Z-Man. In August 2024, Ukrainian forces crossed the Russian border, captured territory in Russia's Kursk, and then, according to Ukrainian reports, the AFU controlled 1,000 kilometers of Russian territory. The stated goal was to divert Russian reserves from the eastern axis, but they also said that it was to take the Kursk nuclear power plant, which they never even got close to. So the operation forced Moscow to adjust its plans, but by the end of April 2025, Russian troops had retaken the area. And the cost of Kursk, in terms of personnel, equipment, and political cost, was high for Ukraine. And the strategic impact was quite limited and very temporary. So the months and years after this, it's almost two, have been marked by high-intensity trench warfare. Russian forces advance in certain sectors of the Donetsk front in the area of Pokrovsk and neighboring settlements, and the pace of the advance is limited but steady. The Ukrainian side reports, localized progress, and then, a little bit of a counter. But the gap between Ukraine's stated goals and the reality on the battlefield has widened dramatically. Officials spoke of strong positions, offensive potential, and pressure on the enemy. But in practice, there's a chronic shortage of personnel, no personnel rotation, mobilization problems, and the need to hold the front in the face of Russia's firepower advantage and numerical superiority. War of attrition, in other words. Ukrainian operations that were supposed to change the dynamic of the war have increasingly ended in tactical defeat. So, and then there was the break with Fedorov. That has been brewing for a while. Fedorov is associated with a new approach focused on technological modernization, the massive use of drones, and asymmetrical action. Tsirski, like attacking Wildberries. Tsirski embodies a more traditional centralized command frontline mode that has developed in the Ukrainian army over the years of war. So these disagreements were not only methods of warfare, but priority. Fedorov insists on reforms that would reduce loss and increase efficiency. Tsirski believed that some of the initiatives would disrupt the existing system and efforts. Fedorov said he proposed personnel changes to Zelensky, including replacing Tsirski, but Zelensky refused. So after this, Tsirski delivered an ultimatum. Zelensky was faced with a choice. On July 15, Fedorov was dismissed. The next day, he held a press conference during which he openly talked about the conflict, accused Tsirski of blocking reform and devising ways to divide the country instead of seeking ways to confront Russia asymmetrically, which means drone warfare deep inside of Russia. So everybody's for this, and the main reason they're for it is because it means their kids can fight in the basement drone supply facility instead of going the front lines. You don't send people to the front lines anymore. You only send drones. And so, but then in Ukraine, they don't send drones to the they don't send drones to the front line. They send them deep inside of Russia, which I think it's weird. It makes no sense to me. Strategically, it doesn't make any sense. So there were some expert assessments on this. And in Russia, the experts saying that the Kiev regime is shaking from the inside. Personnel reshuffles have been perceived in Russia as a sign of internal crisis with the Ukrainian leadership. And, I think it is too. But when reactions in Ukraine are quite divided. Fedorov congratulated Drapady and called his appointment a breath of fresh air and new hope, but he spoke with Tsirski and thanked him for his military operation. But some of the public perceived the shuffle as a response to the street pressure. Meanwhile, the protests demanding Fedorov's return have continued. So they're still, where's Fedorov? Bring him back. And so the sympathy of a part of Ukrainian society toward Fedorov is understandable. He was associated with a new thought process, advanced technology, but there are questions as to whether his so-called achievements match what he's claimed in the media. Here's how a political expert and director of the Institute for the Development of Parliamentarism, a guy named Alexei Chadayev, assessed it. Tsirski is a far more competent military leader than Fedorov, who sincerely believed that conventional warfare could be replaced by drone warfare. I don't believe that, by the way. Tsirski, on the other hand, understood both types of warfare quite well, including at the strategic level. A similar opinion was formed of Drapady, who is commonly portrayed as the figure of a new generation, a young general who supposedly brought with him a more modern and flexible approach to warfare. Chadayev said the same thing about him. Drapady is not a strategist. He's an operational level commander, not a bad one, but hardly more than that, who had already exceeded the threshold of his competence in his previous position. Now that's pretty punch in the face, isn't it? Artamanov said, regarding the current commander-in-chief, although he certainly has a professional military education, he essentially carries out punitive tasks. He's the one who commanded the Kursk operation. Drapady came to public attention in May 2014 when a column under his command rammed a rebel barricade in Mariupol, as I told you about before. Yeah. Crazy. Where are we? Hang on, I got to go back up to a page here. You know what I think I'm going to do? I think I'm going to give you a tune whilst I regroup. How about Them Apples? What are we going to play for you today? Let's pick a very nice song. We won't play Solovyov. We'll leave him off. But we're going to play one of my favorites here. Let's see, I've got it. We need to make sure we begin at the beginning. Somebody keeps messing with the sound on here, though, which I do not appreciate. So let's see how it comes up. Very nice. Gave me just enough time to go and get some coffee. Yes, that's what we like. So everything goes anymore, right? Let's pause and consider let's make sure I haven't messed this up. Let's consider what's going on now. Okay, and the videos are atrocious. Let us begin at the beginning. Here we go.
Ukraine has launched a massive drone attack on Russia overnight, striking residential areas in several regions. A total of 276 Ukrainian UAVs were intercepted by air defenses, with 13 people wounded in Belgorod, including 2 children. This footage published by the city's mayor shows a residential building attacked by Kiev's drones. A number of apartments caught fire, but the flames were later put out by emergency crews, while residents of the building have been put in temporary accommodations. And in the Rostov region, 5 civilians, including a child, were killed during an overnight drone attack. 8 other people were wounded, and the region's governor says that drones fell on private businesses, warehouses, as well as residential buildings.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that going on. I played that because it was in English. Most of them are not. I wanted to let's see. Let's talk about this. Ice breaking, right? Let's see. Listen to this quote, because this is from there's been so many different things going on. I have so many topics that are clicked across the top of my screen here that I want to get to, so it is going to sound a bit disjointed, but let's listen to this one. But I think this is, I wonder if this is Russian or if this is translated. I think this was the translated one. Let me play it for you.
The conflict in Ukraine will eventually end, but the unity it's brought to the Russian nation will not diminish. That's according to Vladimir Putin, who's been meeting with top officers and decorated sailors to mark the country's annual Navy Day. He also added that Kiev faces losing more territory in the coming years.
After all, we didn't start any war. We only began to respond to the hostilities, to the war that the current Kiev regime unleashed with the support of the West against the southeast, the then southeast of Ukraine, which had always been oriented toward Russia. Now, you and I have to bring everything back to its historical course. Look at what is happening in the neighboring country. They are all at each other's throats, fighting like spiders in a jar. They are dividing the money they stole from the Ukrainian people or stealing from their Western sponsors. They are dividing it up among themselves and destroying one another. They flee abroad, hide, come back again, and so on. What kind of unity is there? On top of that, in the western part of Ukraine, it's a gift from Joseph Stalin after the war to Ukraine. Stalin gave these lands to Ukraine, but gave them as part of a single state. Evidently, it never occurred to him that such a situation as today could arise. I'm confident that sooner or later Ukraine will lose these western lands. And what belonged to Poland, what belonged to Hungary, what belonged to Romania sooner or later, not tomorrow, maybe not the day after in a year 2, 10, 15, but everything will historically fall back into place. There was only one guarantor of Ukraine's territorial integrity, Russia. But they saw it as possible and as a blessing for themselves, to declare Russia their enemy, and to declare Russians in Ukraine a non-titular nation, which is utter nonsense, complete madness.
Vladimir Putin also drew attention to the issue of piracy, accusing Russia's adversaries of interfering with the country's trade fleet. The president pointed out that Moscow's naval forces will act carefully but decisively in response to attempts to seize them. International law attorney Clyde Preston said that Western countries have long switched to a so-called rules-based order, with military strength the only way to stand against it.
If you listen to the language of the Western countries today, they don't speak of international law any longer. They speak of the rules-based order. Well, what is the rules-based order? Well, it's whoever has power, whatever they dictate and want, that's the new law. And so that's no law at all. And so that, unfortunately, the idea, and it's already happened, you know, the seizure of Russian assets beyond Russia's borders has been totally illegal throughout this conflict and continues to be. I mean, you've got the money that's being held by the Western countries billions of dollars that are Russian assets. Under what guise? I mean, what international law permits that? The whole thing is really simple now. Mao said that power comes from the end of a gun. And so, in effect, international law today is simply a fulfillment of what Chairman Mao said. So, if you're a powerful nation, then you can do what you want and you call it a rules-based order. Who in the West is observing international treaties right now? I don't see that. And so without that, what's your game plan? I mean, you just have to do it. You have to fulfill your security and your rights, and you have to do it through military means.
The Russian president also mentioned that Moscow does not seek confrontation in the Arctic and is open to cooperation, but he also stressed that it will defend its interests in the region.
We've never sought any kind of confrontation in this region of the world. On the contrary, we've always invited everyone to work in solidarity, to work within the framework of international law. We're ready to do this with everyone, but, of course, on the understanding that these routes undoubtedly belong to the Russian Federation. We have the technical capabilities for this. As is well known, no other country in the world has such an icebreaker fleet. I don't think anyone else has nuclear icebreakers, but we do. Starting with the icebreaker Lenin, and now we're building the so-called Leader, which will break through unprecedentedly thick ice. No one else in the world has such a fleet, and if someone says they're going to build one somewhere, high-tech countries could probably do it, but it will take years, maybe even decades. May God bless everyone and let them work. May God bless everyone and let them work on it. We have nothing against it. We are open to cooperation in this area, but we will certainly protect our interests in the same way as the Northern Sea Route, because the most effective, economically feasible route, the Northern Sea Route, largely lies either in our territorial waters or in the special economic zone of the Russian Federation. That is, it is practically entirely under our control. Not practically, but entirely.
Now, the Northern Sea Route that Vladimir Putin mentioned there is a shipping lane that spans the north coast of Russia, providing a key trade link between Europe and East Asia. Travel time along this route is up to 40% faster, which could cut shipping times by 15 to 20 days, making it a lucrative option for business. In addition, Russia has the largest fleet of icebreakers in the world on hand to assist container ships in their navigation of the northern route. The Russian president also noted that the Navy is key to Russia's nuclear triad, with 60% of the nation's borders being maritime. Also mentioned was Russia's Poseidon unmanned underwater vehicle, which is nearly ready for service. Its Zircon hypersonic missile was also mentioned, which is becoming more accurate amid testing. U.S.-based military analyst Andrei Martyanov even broke down NATO's capabilities to operate in the Arctic.
Ice-breaking capabilities, which are utterly required to operate in Arctic, of NATO, are pathetic, really. They're practically non-existent. Finland built and Norway built a couple of their ice-breaking class patrol vessels, and Finland, for example, built some diesel-electric icebreakers, but they are nowhere near in their capability for the constant, continuous operation in the Arctic year-round, which, for example, Russian Navy, in this particular case, Russian Northern Fleet, do all the time. And again, there is another, it has to be understood that, for example, the submarine component of Northern Fleet alone, we're talking about multi-purpose submarine component, not strategic missile submarines. Multi-purpose means they're cruise missile submarines, fast attack submarines, as they are known in NATO parlance. It alone dwarfs capability of all European NATO states combined. So it cannot be taken seriously because Russia already has in place their immense military potential, and the Arctic development of Arctic in Russia in its scale actually dwarfs anything what any of them can show off.
I shared that because it was a Navy day and Putin was speaking with all those guys, and I wanted to get to the icebreaker fleet and see what all is available, the significant change in the way of warfare and the way of thinking on how this is, on how the war is being conducted, I mean. And when you pay attention to these things, expanding to these commercial lanes, you wonder what they're going to do up in the north. Russia again says, we're open to working together on this front. We're open to developing the northern shipping routes together. We're open to ice-breaking capabilities and, working on commercial things together. The whole point of this war is what we were talking about in the first place, is that nothing is off limits anymore. And so what's going to happen? Russia has these nuclear fleets in the Northern Sea. They've reduced the shipping times from the east to the west, like from Vladivostok, from China, from wherever, over on that side to the other side. If you have to go around the south of India and into the Suez Canal and all those places to take the south route and then go through the Mediterranean and into the North Sea or over across the Atlantic, the way is 40% longer than it is taking the northern shipping route, and Russia has been working on that forever. Trump is talking about it, but like Martyanov pointed out, by the way, I like listening to that guy. I love his accent, and he's been in the U.S. some 25 years or so, and he still has that very heavy accent, and I love it. And which means he speaks Russian more than he at home, far more often than he speaks English, and that's pretty cool. So the ice-breaking capabilities, which are required to operate in the Arctic, NATO, Martyanov said they are pathetic, and he says that Canada, Finland, Norway, Sweden lack vessels that could maintain any persistent presence in the region. Putin said it would take decades for them to catch up or to even have anything viable in that area. And, Russia really wanted to, and still wants to, develop the North Sea route. It is the shortest maritime passage between Asia and Asia Pacific and Northern Europe. And so most of the waters are under control of Russia, especially since they can't get through without Russia's icebreaker fleet anyway. Who needs a Strait of Hormuz on that? And I found an interesting article on breaking the ice. I wonder if it's how long it is. I think we can listen to it here because I don't think it's too long. Let's see.
Hundreds of miles from the nearest civilization in the middle of the Arctic. Endless ice, freezing winds, and beneath it all, an enormous strategic importance. Have you ever wondered what life is like aboard a nuclear icebreaker, hundreds of miles from the nearest civilization, in the middle of the Arctic with literally zero signal? Well, here's your chance to get on board and find out.
This isn't just a ship, it's a self-contained world. Nuclear-powered, ice-crushing, designed to keep its crew alive, healthy, and even entertained. Hundreds of miles from home.
First up, the canteen, because even in the middle of the Arctic, life aboard this ship runs on one universal fuel: good food.
They're showing the nuclear icebreakers mess hall and kitchen. It is nice. I'm sitting here looking at it. I mean, do I want to live there? Probably not. But this is not your typical military style breakfast place. It's actually pretty cool.
This canteen keeps the whole ship running. Every meal is cooked right here on board, feeding a crew that can spend weeks navigating a frozen world with nothing but ice on the horizon.
We have 4 meals a day: breakfast, lunch, afternoon tea, dinner. We work in shifts every day for 8 hours. We have 4 chefs. We import products from Murmansk when we're docked there at the base port for repairs. When there is an opportunity, certain products are delivered to us on request. These are mainly perishables: milk, fruits and vegetables. The products are stored in specially designated ship rooms. These are freezers and refrigerators of different temperatures and capacities for dairy products, vegetables, fruits, meat, fish, all on their own. We have quite a wide range of meals, around 20 different main courses and over 15 different soups, as well as all kinds of porridges and salads.
Safe to say, no one goes hungry here. Breakfast, lunch, snacks and dinner. So after all the eating, a bit of exercise becomes less of an option and more of a necessity. Luckily, this ship has its own gym.
The gym has it all: cardio machines, free weights, everything you'd find back on land. And if you think life aboard this ship is all solo activities, think again. There's even a small sports court for team competitions: volleyball, basketball, badminton, you name it. Crew members have formed their own teams and have been playing in them for years, always ready to challenge one another, especially in volleyball. And that's not all. This ship even has a swimming pool.
Sounds impossible, right? Yet, here it is, a liquid escape from the frozen world outside. And it's not just for fun, it's a place to exercise, unwind, and even get some physiotherapy.
The pool is filled with water taken straight from the seas the icebreaker sailed through, giving the experience an extra connection to the Arctic itself. After a few laps in the pool, a rare break from the frozen world outside, it's straight to the sauna. Yes, there's one on board too, giving everyone a place to stay warm and unwind after a long day.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine you wouldn't want to have a sauna up there, especially a nuclear-powered one. That's kind of cool. And everything they've been showing so far, the swimming pool is not Olympic size, not by any stretch, but it's, you can certainly swim laps back and forth, and the size of these things is interesting. I found the basketball court, the volleyball court, and things like that. They're not full size, but it's pretty cool. And the volleyball court in particular, they have the walls are like, the ball's not going out of bounds. Let's put it that way. It's kind of cool. But I assume you're on a ship. I mean, I imagine on a submarine this stuff isn't happening. But this is a pretty large icebreaker. It's nowhere close to a cruise ship or anything like that. But it's a pretty cool process for a nuclear icebreaker and nuclear reactor down below.
Well, we have the most diverse leisure time here. We can get together in this break room. In this recreation room, we have board games, table football, and hockey. There are also board games like Monopoly. There's also the game Mafia here, and some other different games were bought. We also have a PlayStation 5 console with different games. For those who want, for example, physical activity, there is a gym where you can stretch different limbs, build up your physical strength. There's a gym where we can play volleyball, football, and basketball. Everything is mini, of course, but also you can relax in a sauna, and there's also a pool below. You can quickly go down and cool off. For those who prefer more intellectual leisure, they can go to the library and pick up a book.
And just one last stop before the day wraps up, the library. This historic treasure trove is packed with books collected over the years, waiting to be discovered. So it's time for me to pick a favorite and get lost in a good read.
Aboard this icebreaker, the library holds a huge collection of books, some dating all the way back to the Soviet era. Back in the day, crew members would exchange books with colleagues from other ships during docking, and some would even bring their own copies and leave them behind for others to enjoy. Today, the library still carries that spirit.
From sauna sessions to delving into literature, all in the middle of the Arctic. Every corner of the ship is designed to keep you sharp, fit, and sane. Isolation is inevitable here, but boredom, absolutely impossible. Anastasia Volodina, RT, reporting from the Arctic.
Pretty cool, huh? It's an interesting story, and getting on a ship like that would be pretty cool. So right now, a speech is, well, Putin met at the State Duma with lawmakers, and he has been reviewing the legislators' record over the last 5 years. It's a meeting that takes place, the eighth session is completed in the lower house of parliament, and it's they review the results. And so the Kremlin press service said on Sunday that Putin would summarize the results of the elected representatives' large-scale legislative work during this term. And the Duma chairman, Vyacheslav Volodin, said earlier that members had adopted 1,147 laws, accounting for 38.5% of those passed were at protecting the people of Russia. According to him, they were about healthcare, tracking cyber fraud, protecting spiritual and family values, and other socially significant matters. He said that every third law was socially oriented, and the legislatures had passed 61 laws supporting families protecting children, 71 concerning public health, and 80 pertained to education. So the eighth term began its work on October 12, 2021, and consisted of 450 lawmakers from 5 parties. Putin's United Russia has 310 seats. The Communist Party, the New People Party, a Just Russia Party, and the Liberal Democratic Party of Russia. The eighth term is scheduled to conclude its work Monday, according to information released. And so the elections are coming up. They're going to be pretty important. Let's see. I want to go back and see some of these. Let's see. Elections are scheduled to take place in September 18 to the 20th, and 450 MPs will be chosen under Russia's electoral system, 225 seats filled through single-member constituencies, and 225 through party lists. No more than 11 political parties are able to participate. Bulayev said documents have been submitted by all parliamentary parties: United Russia, the Communist Party, Liberal Democratic Party of Russia, the New People, and a Just Russia, as well as 6 non-parliamentary parties: Yabloko, the Russian Party of Pensioners for Social Justice, the Communists of Russia, Rodina, and the Party of Direct Democracy, and the Greens Party. So Putin stated that the last few years have been a defining set of years for the country, and said Russia continues to defend its security, its interests, its truth, and justice. The president added that its servicemen serving on the front line are fighting to protect Russia, that they are supported by the whole country. We will achieve our goals, and together we'll do everything for our victory, for Russia, said Putin. Putin said that the lawmakers had lived up to their responsibilities during a period of historic challenges. He said the Russophobia machine has gone into full force, especially after 2022, and resulted in an unprecedented number of sanctions against Russia. He argues that the restrictions had failed to damage Russia and had instead inflicted the greatest harm on Europe and other states that introduced them. Attempts to weaken the Russian economy, the financial system, science, and education have also failed. And he accused Western countries of rejecting the right of a nation to choose its own independent path and selectively invoke the UN Charter. I agree with this completely, only when it serves their interests. They want obedient vassals, he said, adding that the use of double standards is obvious to the entire world, and it is, if you're looking. He said, Russia's opponents have failed on the battlefield. and are now resorting to terror attack. The people of Russia will never be broken. This has not happened and will not happen in the future, he said, adding that the country's political system and power institutions are prepared to repel any hostile action. He presented some awards to several lawmakers, and after handing them out, he gave a closing speech, and he said Russia has retained its position as the world's fourth largest economy, according to purchase power parity, and is now ahead of the EU by that measure. He acknowledged that inflation and other risks remain, but argued that the economy is more stable, allowing the country to expand industry, strengthen the defense sector, and address social needs. Putin said Russia is going to continue pursuing military objectives with caution and determination, and warned that reckless acts will risk setbacks on the battlefield. We will act carefully and persistently to achieve the goals that have been set. He concluded his speech by describing the current period as difficult and truly deciding. We are going through a time of battles, he said, adding that this is understood not only by the authorities, but by the entire country. And addressing the lawmakers, he said they represented the Russian people and had acted as soldiers fighting for the country's interests, adding that their constituents had reason to be very proud of them. And so it's still going on where they had spoken about it, and those elections are going to be pretty important, just as they are here. He talked as well about you attack anything anymore, and there was a video that I was gonna share with you. Let's see, the one where I was telling you in Zaporizhia they bombed the resort, the tourist report. Here you go, Russian tourist attraction. Let's see here. I'm going to share that with you. Now what? Let's try this. Here we go.
This is what Ukrainian state terrorism looks like. We are at one of vacation resorts in Zaporozhye region in the town of Kirilovka. 12 people were killed on Saturday morning when at least 6 Ukrainian drones deliberately struck this hotel. This is a piece of one of the drones. This is a wing with clear markings in Ukrainian. Now, according to investigators who are working here on the scene, this is a drone made by a company called Firepoint. This is a so-called FP2 medium-range, very heavy drone that killed several people here instantly. And as you can see, the amount of damage is absolutely horrifying. Right now, we'll walk through this destroyed hotel and show you the consequences. Ukrainian drones struck this seaside hotel at around 1:30 a.m. when the vacationers here were already sleeping in bed with their children. Now the rescue operations began almost immediately, and they lasted throughout the whole day on Saturday and finished at around 5 p.m. The rescue workers from Russian Emergencies Ministry would still pull people out of the rubble throughout the day and were able to save some of the victims here. K9 teams were here as well, and one of the dogs discovered the body of a 6-year-old girl with her head torn off that lay about 60 meters away from her little body. And also, just to give you the cynicism of the Ukrainian terrorists, well, they packed their drones with party decorations as they struck the people here in Kirilovka. At the moment of the strike, there were at least 53 people at this hotel. And of course, there is damage to nearby hotels as well. But thankfully, there were not as many residents there during these Ukrainian strikes.
We were waiting for the main wave of strikes to end so we could move in and provide assistance. We saw that there were ordinary civilians here. It was a shocking sight because people were running out and there was fire everywhere. We immediately rushed towards the epicenter of the blaze. We heard cries for help. A woman was pinned under a slab in a burning building with the roof engulfed in flames. The hardest moment for me through it all was when we were clearing the rubble. There was a child's severed head and an arm in another place. What was most unbearable was that when they lifted a slab, there on the sofa, just as they had been sleeping, lay a father with his son. And when I went out, walked to the car for water, I saw that there were still other civilians just standing around waiting for something, and one woman needed help. I went over to her, examined her. She kept asking about her son, her child, but I already knew that they would never see each other again. This is an attack against civilians. It's pure fascism. Children are guilty of nothing. They were just here on vacation. They weren't thinking of anything bad. They were just with their families, wanting to spend the weekend by the seaside. They could not have known that something like this could happen. They were simply asleep.
Our doctors worked as competently, quickly, and correctly as possible. And it must be noted that recently, of course, the strain on them has been colossal. But even so, we are managing. Today is a day of mourning for us. Everyone is in shock, including the medical staff, as well as ordinary residents of the city. This is a situation that has truly shaken everyone.
The night was hard. Some patients are in critical condition. We examined about 10 people. Among the injured, 2 patients required emergency neurosurgical care and underwent operations. I want to acknowledge everyone who took part in helping these victims. This is a huge tragedy, a catastrophe, an enormous loss for the victims and their loved ones. It's terrible.
At this point, we know for a fact that this was indeed a deliberate Ukrainian terrorist attack against civilians. How do we know that? Well, I spoke with the investigators and they discovered data controllers from those heavy drones that struck this area. And drones cited the location of this particular hotel as their target. There are absolutely no military sites close by. The front line is at least 100 kilometers away from this area, and there are absolutely no military facilities here either. All around us are just hotels with vacationers and those people who came here with their children for the weekend. The explosives that the Ukrainian drones were filled with were so powerful that they instantly destroyed the buildings where people were sleeping and even melted some of the metal accessories here within the room. You can see the wall here was completely destroyed, and now I'm entering another room. Now, there was a couple sleeping here, and the girl, she was basically buried under the rubble. Her boyfriend quickly ran out and asked for help. And people who came to rescue those in need here, they came to help them. And fortunately, that girl was unscathed.
We came on vacation with my girlfriend, had a great day. Then we were falling asleep when around 1:30 in the morning there was a blast, and we were both buried under a concrete slab. For about 30 seconds I was in shock. Then I started moving. I pulled my legs out from under the rubble, from under that slab, just breaking free and kicking through the wall. The fire was already behind me. I started calling for help, throwing aside all those slabs, all those tables that were on that huge slab to free my girlfriend. Some guys rushed over and started working quickly to pull her out. The only thing that worried me was that she would survive. Yeah, it was scary, of course. Everything was ablaze. The main question for me is why this happened just like that. Such an ordinary day, nothing foreshadowed trouble, and then this happened. Honestly, I didn't even think it was real.
This crater was formed after the very first strike of Ukrainian drones against the resort city of Kirilovka. The strike took place once again around 1:30 in the morning. It was a deliberate strike against civilians who were vacationing here with their children. The owner of this hotel, which is right next to Allion, the one that we were talking about today, said that thankfully he's yet to open. If he was open, there are several houses here as well. The number of casualties could have been much higher. Roman Kosarev, RT, Kirilovka, Zaporozhye region.
Crazy sauce. So the videos are pretty terrible on that, and they show quite a bit of destruction in there. And I realize it's war, and I realize what's going on, but these attacks on civilian targets, just like it was in Crimea when they did the fragmentation rounds on the beach. 160 people targeted, several drones full of frag grenades and fragmentation devices. This isn't warfare. This I don't know. And trust me, if I was ever called upon to go to war when I served in the Army, I always took the point of view that I had signed a contract, and I was that's what I intended to do. And you sign up for that. You are trained for that. You are prepared for that. And they do the same thing in Ukraine. And but targeting intentionally places like Wildberries, places like the Crimean beaches, places like Kirilovka that they were just talking about, in little resort communities, school buses, all of the things that there is just overwhelming evidence of. It's just unfortunate that that's what they do. 50 Ukrainian drones, targeting residential buildings, private businesses, killing children. The young guy talking about his girlfriend in there, he's probably in his early 20s, and gone to Kirilovka. It's a well-known place to go and vacation, and certainly in Zaporizhia. And there's just zero respect for that. Ukrainian rhetoric talks about it all the time. Zelensky warned that Moscow would burn if Ukraine continued to be attacked. The campaign is intended to hurt Russia's economy and make Russians personally feel the conflict. It's not your typical wartime efforts to attack civilians. So I don't know. It doesn't prove that every attack is unlawful, but boy, there's so many of them, it's hard to think anything else. If Wildberries was attacked solely because a particular warehouse contained identifiable military cargo, maybe Kiev could defend the strike as an attack on the military objective. But if it was attacked because Wildberries is central to Russian consumer life, like their minister said, because hundreds of thousands of small businesses depend upon it, and because its destruction would make ordinary Russians suffer, then the stated purpose sounds less like a military campaign and more like a civilian attack mode and attack module. The more Ukrainian officials celebrate the economic and psychological effect on Russians, the more difficult it becomes to maintain that civilian suffering isn't just incidental. And I think that's it for today. We're going to wrap it up. I'm not going to be doing a show tomorrow or Wednesday, I mean. I will be traveling. If I do, it'll be pre-recorded, but I really don't think I'm going to be able to. I have a pretty tight schedule, and it doesn't appear that I'm going to be able to do a show tomorrow or Wednesday, but I will return on Thursday for sure. And if there's a recorded program in between there, I will let you know, and because it will be on the air. And that's how you will find out. I very much appreciate you being a listener here at International Flavor and at Damn Radio. You can go to damradio.com/schedule and keep track of the schedule of where the shows go from here. And coming up after us is Shield Maidens of Missouri. So get prepared. It's coming your way. Have a very good Mid-Missouri day. I'll see you live come Thursday.